This is Volcano Princess, and I'm breaking down if this is worth a tired dad's limited gaming time. Because when you only get a little time to game, the real questions aren't just, is it fun? It's, will it feel fulfilling? How much will it demand from you? And more importantly, can you step away when life happens? So let's start with what you're actually getting into here. Volcano Princess presents itself as a parenting simulator RPG adventure where you play as a father raising your daughter, with the choices you make shaping both her future and possibly the future of the kingdom. But pretty quickly it becomes clear the game is a strange mix of genres here. At different points it plays like a parenting simulator, a life and growing up sim, a light resource management game, a light turn-based combat game, and even a light dating sim. And at a certain point, the game shifts from you actively raising your daughter to playing from her point of view instead. One thing worth mentioning though, the audio is mostly in Chinese or Japanese with fairly sparse voice acting. Most of the experience is delivered through text, and while the English translation is generally understandable, it can occasionally feel a little oddly formatted or phrased. So how does this actually play out once you're in game? The game runs in monthly rounds, and the core gameplay loop revolves around deciding how your daughter spends her time, choosing activities, interacting with people around town, and shaping how her abilities and interests develop. During the early stages, you mostly experience the game as the father guiding her life, setting goals for the kind of parent you want to be, whether that's wise, protective, or more of a doting father. The story begins cute and lighthearted, but things get pushed forward when your daughter secretly applies to the kingdom's Knight Academy and gets accepted. That moment is when the structure of the game really begins to change. From there, the perspective shifts and you begin experiencing much more of the game from your daughter's point of view, walking around town as her and making the day-to-day decisions of her life. You still step in as a father occasionally, offering advice and guidance, but most of the experience now revolves around the choices she makes and the direction her life begins to take. It also feels like an intentional design choice to reflect her becoming more independent as she grows up. As the years pass, the background story also begins to shift. The tone gradually darkens, with war looming, political tensions rising, and larger threats beginning to unfold in the world around her. Combat does appear in a couple forms, including simple auto battles and light exploration encounters. All of this ultimately leads into what kind of adult your daughter grows into and how much she ends up shaping the future of the kingdom itself. And the range of outcomes here is surprisingly wide, including the possibility of much darker paths. The game is very clearly designed around multiple playthroughs, with each run revealing different outcomes and gradually unlocking more ways to influence your future. So once you understand how the game plays and the kind of outcomes it can lead to, the next question becomes an important one, especially for tired dads. Can you actually step away when life happens? The good news is that nothing in this game progresses unless you make an input. Even though there isn't a traditional pause button, the structure of the game effectively pauses itself, meaning you can walk away whenever you need to and nothing continues without you. Just make sure no little ones come by and start pressing on things. If you need to completely stop though, the game does include both manual saves and autosaves, but they work in a very specific way. The save system only records the start of a round, even if you manually save mid-round. And that detail becomes important once you look at how long rounds can actually get. When you first start, a round usually lasts about 5 to 10 minutes. But as your daughter gets older, and depending on how much you optimize her training and schedule, a single round can easily stretch past half an hour, especially if you start engaging with some of the more time-consuming activities, such as gambling for money, clearing combat areas, or going on dates. If the game closes before the round finishes, well, needless to say, you just lost the progress of that entire round. I learned that the hard way when I lost a huge chunk of luck-based progress I couldn't recreate when I came back. That one stung a lot. At the time, it felt absolutely disrespectful of my time, and I definitely questioned why it was designed that way. To be fair to the developer, they do warn of this every time you start the game and in the menus. But that doesn't make it sting any less when it unfortunately happens. But on the other hand, I can also see the reasoning. It also discourages a lot of save scumming, which some players might actually appreciate. Once you understand how the save system works, it rarely becomes a major issue. But I'd be lying if I said it never happened again when life got in the way. A full playthrough takes roughly 12 hours if you experience most of what the game has to offer. Later runs can move faster once you understand the systems and start unlocking upgrades through the new Game Plus mechanics. But since the game is clearly built around multiple playthroughs, the total time you spend with it can grow quite a bit if you decide to chase different endings or push toward the true ending. Overall, I feel the game mostly respects your time, though the save system can occasionally create a pretty frustrating friction point. And depending on how much you decide to optimize each run, that can also change how demanding the game feels moment to moment. For the most part, Volcano Princess is actually very low stress to play. Most of your time is spent making simple decisions, choosing activities, planning schedules, and watching events unfold, usually with single button inputs and not much else required. Because everything happens at your own pace, the game ends up feeling extremely relaxed moment to moment. Between the slower pace and the calm music, it's the kind of game that's very easy to settle into. Honestly, it's the kind of game you could probably fall asleep to. Not because it's boring, but because if you're anything like me, you're probably playing this later at night after a long day. I know I've caught myself nodding off to it a few times. If you start chasing specific endings or optimizing your daughter's stats though, the focus level does climb up a little bit. Especially when you're trying to balance schedules, relationships, and the limited actions you can take each round. But most of the time, the game stays very relaxed moment to moment, even while you're working towards specific outcomes that can affect how difficult the game can feel. Volcano Princess doesn't actually have traditional difficulty settings. There's no hard mode or challenge option. Instead, the difficulty mostly depends on the outcome you're trying to achieve. If you're just playing through the story and seeing where things go, the game is fairly forgiving. Most outcomes don't require heavy optimization, and it's actually pretty hard to completely ruin a run unless you're intentionally trying to. Where the challenge really starts to appear is when you aim for specific endings. Higher tier outcomes, especially the true ending, require much more careful planning around stats, relationships, and how you spend your limited actions each round. And depending on what kind of outcome you end up with, the tone of the game can shift quite a bit as well. Which begs the question, is this actually living room friendly? Because of the art style and overall presentation, Volcano Princess can come across as a very light and wholesome game. And for a good portion of it, it really is. But depending on the path you go down, some of the outcomes and story directions can lean into much darker themes. So, while most of the game is perfectly fine to have on in a shared space, just be aware that those darker themes also include some more suggestive or adult implications, usually tied to the endings. Apart from that, the only looks you might get are during some of the romance scenes from your daughter's perspective, with mostly male love interests. Which felt a little weird for me considering you started the game from a dad's perspective. I, for one, started with the mindset of no dating allowed until she was out of the house. Because let's face it, no one is good enough for my little princess. But the relationships she can have are another factor that affects how each run can play out. She can end up with one, she can end up with none, or apparently, multiple. And that's just one of the many things that adds to the game's replay value. The number of directions her life can go as you play through the core gameplay is the main selling point of what gives Volcano Princess its long-term value, especially the true ending, which adds depth and intrigue to the main story that can be easy to miss if you're not intentionally pursuing it. It felt really rewarding to stumble into it, even though I was wholly unprepared to tackle it. despite coincidentally focusing my daughter's growth in ways that ended up helping with that event. Those moments start tying together a lot of the intentionally confusing and strange parts of the main storyline, especially as you begin uncovering truths about your daughter, your family, and even your own origins. With the new Game Plus like mechanics we mentioned earlier, each playthrough you do can get you points for having your daughter experience things she hasn't before. Each complete run rewards you those points, which you can then use to influence future runs by buffing things like base growth, starting stats, and even higher starting relationships, which makes it far easier to experiment or even dominate later runs. And I tell you, it's kind of hilarious watching a 12-year-old girl take out early exploration areas solo on her first ever day, or put adults to shame in contests of battle prowess, graceful dancing, or eloquent debate. So, when you put all of that together, is Volcano Princess worth a tired dad's limited gaming time? Yes, but with a caveat. If you enjoy this type of game like I do, it's absolutely worth it. But this style of gameplay is definitely niche and isn't for everyone. Apart from the slightly strange mix of genres, and specifically the shift from daughter-raising sim into consistently role-playing your own daughter even in romance events, the game ends up being surprisingly heartfelt. And when your daughter finally grows up and leaves, that moment will probably hit girl dads the hardest, especially with the soundtrack often amplifying those emotional beats. The save system can occasionally create some frustrating moments, but once you understand how it works, it's something you can mostly plan around. Mostly. Though let's be honest, life tends to happen right when you finally think you've got a clear stretch of time, and when it does, losing that progress is going to suck. But if that sounds appealing to you, watching a virtual daughter grow up and seeing how far she can go across multiple endings, Volcano Princess might be a great fit for those short to flexible gaming windows. Or if you just want to go in and be a little sadistic, just to see how far you can push her the other way. Yeah, that's definitely an option too. Though, I'll be honest, I could barely stomach being a bad father just to see everything the game had to offer. But anyways, if you found this review helpful and want to see more, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. I'm Split, and I'm split. See y'all next time.